For the first 30 seconds, imagine a version of Chucky where the rules no longer matter, where the rituals fail, where the control that kept the monster focused finally collapses, and where the evil inside the doll stops playing games and starts unraveling reality itself. Because this story will reveal the exact moment Chucky crossed a line he could never return from, how a single breakdown turned calculated cruelty into uncontrollable chaos, why this was the bloodiest and most disturbing day in his existence, and how the consequences of that loss of control continue to haunt every corner of the horror mythos long after the screams faded. The legend of Chucky was always built on intent, precision, and purpose. A killer trapped in plastic who relied on planning, manipulation, and dark rituals to survive. But on this day something fundamental broke, not in the world around him, but deep within the corrupted soul bound to that smiling face, because control was the one thing keeping the monster from becoming something far worse, something raw, unstable, and infinitely more terrifying. It began quietly, as most true nightmares do, with a sense that something was wrong long before anyone could explain it. As the doll's movements grew erratic, his presence felt heavier, and the air around him seemed to vibrate with a sickening tension that suggested the evil inside was no longer contained by rules or logic, but driven by impulse alone. Chucky had always understood pain as a tool, fear as a weapon, and death as a means to an end. Yet on this day the rituals that grounded him started to fail. The familiar whispers of control inside his mind twisted into static, and the boundaries between the doll and the human soul inside began to blur, creating moments where rage replaced strategy and instinct overwhelmed intention. The first sign of collapse was unpredictability, because the careful stalking and psychological torment were replaced by sudden, explosive violence that felt less like a plan and more like a seizure of pure hatred, as if the doll itself were rebelling against the soul inside, forcing actions even Chucky did not anticipate or fully understand. Objects in the room began to move without reason. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, and the sense of being watched multiplied into something far worse. The feeling of being hunted by a presence that no longer recognized limits, mercy, or even its own survival. As the breakdown intensified, the rules of possession that once protected Chucky from complete dissolution started to unravel, causing moments where the doll appeared almost alive in a new way, twitching, convulsing, and radiating a violent energy that suggested the evil within was tearing itself apart, desperate to escape its own confinement, even if it meant total destruction. This was no longer the familiar killer doll horror, but something closer to a supernatural meltdown, where every second brought a new escalation. Every movement carried the threat of sudden death, and every pause felt like the inhale before an unstoppable scream. The environment itself seemed to respond to the chaos, lights flickering violently, walls echoing with unseen impacts, and the atmosphere thickening into something suffocating, as if the space could barely contain the force of the evil being unleashed. What made this moment truly terrifying was not just the violence but the absence of purpose, because Chucky was no longer killing to survive, to transfer souls, or to fulfill some twisted goal, but killing because the loss of control had stripped away meaning itself, leaving only rage, fear, and an instinct to destroy everything within reach. The soul bound to the doll began to fracture memories, looping and collapsing identities bleeding into one another, and the familiar personality dissolving into something feral and unstable, creating a version of Chucky that was louder, faster, and far more dangerous than anything seen before. This was the point where the horror became existential, because a monster without control is not just dangerous, but contagious, spreading chaos without reason, infecting spaces with terror, and leaving behind a trail of trauma that cannot be explained or rationalized. The violence escalated, not in scale but in intensity, each act feeling more desperate, more erratic, and more horrifying than the last, as if the evil itself were panicking, aware on some primal level that it was losing coherence and fighting against its own collapse. Moments that should have ended the threat only made it worse, because pain no longer slowed the doll, damage no longer mattered, and fear no longer served as fuel but as noise in a mind already overloaded with corruption. As control slipped further away, the distinction between the doll and the demon blurred entirely, transforming Chucky into something closer to a walking curse than a character, a moving epicenter of horror where every step distorted reality, and every second threatened irreversible damage. This was the day the mask finally shattered, revealing not a mastermind villain, but a broken, screaming evil that could not stop itself, could not think clearly, and could not be reasoned with, turning survival into a matter of pure luck rather than intelligence or bravery. The aftermath was worse than the event itself, because silence followed the chaos, a heavy, unnatural quiet, filled with unanswered questions. broken spaces and the lingering sense that something had gone wrong in a way that could never be fixed. The places touched by this loss of control were left stained not just with blood but with fear itself, as if the walls remembered, the air remembered, and the darkness had learned something new about how far evil could go when it stopped pretending to be in control. The most disturbing truth is that this breakdown did not end Chucky but changed him, because once control is lost, it can never fully be reclaimed, leaving behind a monster that understands what it feels like to let go completely and may one day choose to do so again. This story haunts fans because it removes the comfort of predictability, replacing it with the idea that even the rules of horror can fail. And when they do, the result is not clever or entertaining, but raw, chaotic, and deeply unsettling. The day Chucky lost control was not just another chapter, but a warning, a glimpse into what happens when evil stops playing a role and reveals its true uncontrollable nature, leaving behind a legacy of fear that refuses to fade. If this story pulled you into the darkness and kept you there until the very end, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with your thoughts on this terrifying moment, and share this video with other horror fans who dare to look into the night, because more unsettling stories are always waiting just beyond the light.